Okay, today is October 25th, and it's 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This is our time for a weekly Latin Studies meeting. Today, we're going to continue with Latin reading, getting into Lesson 2. We spent a couple weeks on Lesson 1, so we're going to get into Lesson 2. We're going to look at Lesson 4 in vocabulary and then talk about Article 16 in grammar, which talks about the parts of speech. Still have some students coming in. Hold on a second. So a lot to go over today. We're just going to move slowly through the Latin reading lessons. I'm going to talk about things and sort of quiz you a little bit and discuss things that I wouldn't put into a printed lesson because it would make it too confusing. So we'll add some details to the lessons, which will make them helpful for everybody, whether you're just getting started or you've already done these lessons. I'm certain that you won't know all the stuff that I talk about, so they'll be helpful. We'll go over the vocab lesson, make sure you understand the pronunciation of everything, see how to study these lessons, and then all of this will be recorded so that you can watch it again if you need to. But remember, these meetings aren't intended to replace our online lessons, and everything that's needed is explained in the online lessons. So if you miss something here, it's no big deal. The proper place to study these lessons is by yourself using the online lessons. And these meetings really are, I wouldn't say relaxed because we work the whole time, but they're just meant to be helpful. Okay, so to study these things for mastery, work on the online lessons yourself. But these classes, I hope to just sort of fill in all the blanks, explain things, make sure you understand them, and help you to study privately to make your studies more successful, help you progress more quickly, okay? So let's start. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start by looking at the next vocabulary lesson first. So let's take a look at this. You should see the vocab lesson up on your screen. Lesson 4, the subject of the lesson is heaven or chelum. Last lesson, we looked at the world and we talked about the 4 elements of the world. Does anybody know what the 4 elements are? What are the 4 elements? Hit them in the chat. Water is 1, earth is 1, earth, air, fire, water, earth, air. Let's put them in order from highest to lowest. Highest to lowest. Yeah, Jude got that right. Fire, air, water, earth. Okay, the 4 classical elements. Very good. In philosophy, they're called the material causes of the world. So the 4 elements, we talked about that in the last vocab lesson. And here we move on to the heaven. Let me ask you this, which of those 4 elements is present in heaven? And remember, when I say heaven, I'm talking about heaven in this lesson. Which of the elements is present in the heaven? Yeah, fire and air, that's good. Where do we find fire in the heaven? Where do we find fire? The sun, right? The stars, good. Okay. And obviously the air is in our atmosphere on the earth. Okay, good. No, don't get spiritual on me, Bernadette. We're not talking about the Holy Spirit with fire. We're talking about physical, natural things that move. Okay. So lesson 4, we talk about the heaven, and the Latin word for heaven is caelum. It's pronounced in church Latin, it's pronounced caelum. In classical Latin, it's pronounced caelum. So 2 different pronunciations. Notice in the spelling of this word, you'll see it's spelled 2 different ways in Latin. You'll see it spelled C-A-E-L-U-M, caelum. And you'll also see it spelled C-O-E-L-U-M, like usually when you see the name Regina Caeli, it's spelled C-O-E. It can be spelled either way. Either way, it's pronounced caelum, so it doesn't make a difference. So the heaven, caelum. Anyone who studied Pliny Anyone who's studied Pliny's natural history know why it's called Chelum? Who knows that? I know some of you know it. Anyone who studied Pliny know why it's called Chelum? I'm not going to call on anybody, but I know that some of you know it. At least you wrote the answer in your assignments. Anybody know why it's called Chelum? Oh, well, I guess it'll just be left a mystery. But if you study Pliny's natural history, you have to study Pliny. He explains it. Yeah, that's good, George. That's the exact answer there. It's a Roman word for something. Yeah. Roman word for what? Anybody study Pliny who knows the answer to this? Yeah, we'll talk about Latin grammar. It's called Chelum. No, I think you're just guessing now. It's called Chelum because it appears that the objects in the heavens are engraved in the heavens. It appears that things are engraved. So it's called Chelum. You can look that word up in a Latin dictionary and see how it relates to engraving. All right, so that's the Chelum, the heaven. That's lesson 4 in vocab. So let's walk through this here. Follow me on the screen so you get all this information. Remember, these images are intended to present images of the vocabulary, and they've got numbers in them. If you look carefully, sometimes it's hard to see them, but they're numbered. And you can see the numbers next to the vocab words, so you can actually find things if the picture is clear enough. And remember that the words that are in italics are the important Latin words. Okay, you don't need a dictionary. Just relax. I'll be the dictionary during our meetings. So Chelum, we see Chelum number 1, Chelum rotator, Chelum rotator. The heavens are turned about, they're wheeled about, they turn around the earth. Et ambit terram. Ambit means encompasseth. You see this translation over here. And then terram means earth. Yeah, from it's where rotated comes from. That's right. So the heavens are turned about and they encompass the earth on all sides. In other words, the earth floats in the midst of the heaven as it is. The earth stantem in medio, standing in the midst of the heavens. Now notice here, we've got this ancient or classical view of the universe, right? Where the earth is the center of the universe, not the sun. So we've got this image of the earth-centered universe. We could also describe the universe as sun-centered. Either one of those systems can be true. It's just a difference in point of reference. Einstein proved that. So you'll read this and it might sound a little strange if you've studied modern astronomy at all, but everything is fine about this. It's just a different point of reference. So the heavens are turned about and they encompass the earth, which stands in the midst of the heavens. We have the 2 vocab words, chelum for heaven and terram for earth. This word terra, where we get the word terrain from, right? The earth, terrestrial means earthly. Extraterrestrial means from outside of the earth. Comes from this word terra, okay? Terra. Next, sol, number 3. Sol, we see that pictured up at the top of this image here. Sol, or the sun. It's where we get the word solar from. So solar power just means sun power. And we've got this cool phrase, ubi ubi. Ubi ubi means wherever. Sol, ubi ubi est. Wherever it is, it fulget perpetuo. Fulget perpetuo. It shines perpetually. It is always shining. It's the source of light. Always shining. Ubi ubi, wherever it is. You can't ask, is that a diphthong? Because I don't know what that means. Okay, so ubi ubi es, wherever it is. Ubiquitous means everywhere. So obviously from the word ubi, but ubi ubi means wherever. It fulget perpetuo, shines perpetually. And then you have ut ut, howsoever. Densa nubile. Densa means dark. and nubila means clouds. Okay, and notice they're labeled number 4. And if you look on this image, you can see the clouds here wrap around the earth and are numbered number 4. So that's nubila, plural for clouds. Eripiant eum anobis, the clouds, eripiant, take away him, that is the sun, anobis, from us. The clouds take away the sun from us. They cover or block the sun. Okay? Facitque suis radiis, and it makes his, and he makes his radiis, rays of the sunlight. And then they're labeled number 5 up here. You can see these lines all coming down from the sun. Those are the rays of the sun. There's a number 5 over here that labels them. The rays of the sun, the radii. And then we've got the word lucem for light and diem for day. Okay, so the sun makes rays, makes light, and through light it makes day. Okay, so some vocab in italics there. Make sure you study that carefully. Make sure you get the pronunciation right. Think about English derivatives when you learn new Latin words. That's the benefit. Now, ex opposito on the other side of the earth. Again, if you look at this image, you see that the one half is lit up by the sun and the other half is in darkness. The other half is in darkness. So ex opposito on the other side, and that translation continues, on the other side over against it. All of that is the translation of ex opposito. Sunt tenebrae, and you should know that word from the Gospel of John, right? Tenebrae means darkness, and thence, or from there, from the darkness, comes nox, night. And that word nox, I'll type this in the chat real quick. The genitive form of it, where we see the stem, is noctis. So nocturnal, if you have a nocturnal animal, give me an example of a nocturnal animal. What's a nocturnal animal? Good. Bat, owl, possum. Good. Okay. Nocturnal just means an animal that is active at night. Okay. So good. In the night, nocte, in the night. Splendet, shineth the luna, shineth the moon. Notice the different verb here. Notice that when it talks about the sun shining, it uses the verb fulget. Where is it at? Fulget, the sun shines. The moon does not do the same thing, though. The moon splendet. That means the moon reflects the light. The moon shines, but not in the same way as the sun. We can see that by a different verb. At night, the moon, luna, splendet, or shines. The word luna, obviously, the word lunar comes from that, right? It means anything that relates to the moon. Luna, a lunatic. A lunatic is a person who is said to have been made crazy by a different phase of the moon. You know, you hear wacky things like, crazy people come out when there's a full moon, or werewolves come out when there's a full moon, all these wacky stories. That's where the idea of lunatics come from, that the moon can make people act crazy. Okay, so luna. And stella, or stelle here, stelle, stars. So a constellation is a grouping together of stars. A constellation, the stella is the star. And what do stars do? We don't say that they shine in the same way that the sun does. Yeah, Stella Maria, that's right. It's Mary the star, right? We say that stella micant and scintillant. Okay, we don't say they fulget like the sun. They don't shine powerfully and steadily like the sun. If you watch the stars, if you look up at the stars, it appears that they glitter or twinkle. Think of the story, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? The stars twinkle, they scintillant, okay? 2 verbs that describe the appearance of stars. Then we have the word vesperi, that means evening. So evening prayer, if you go to a monastery, evening prayer is called vespers. Very good, George. Okay, vespers, it's just the Latin word for evening, vesperi. And crepusculum, crepusculum is twilight. That's when the sun begins to set. Crepusculum. And vesperi, the evening. Evening refers to that whole period from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon onward. That whole period is referred to as evening. If you look at some monasteries and convents, you'll see that they even have evening prayer sometimes at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because that whole period when the sun begins to head down is called vesper. Crepusculum is when the sun actually begins to go under the horizon and you can't see the sun anymore, but the sky is still lit up. Twilight. Okay. Then mane means in the morning. Mane means in the morning. Aurora. Aurora is the dawn. Aurora is the dawn. That's when the sky begins to change color before the sun rises. Before the sun rises, if you've ever been up that early, if you've ever been up early in the morning when it's still dark, before the sun comes up, you notice the sky just begins to change color. That's aurora. That's the dawn or the breaking of the day. And diluculum refers to the time when the sun actually rises, I believe. So the sun is actually up above the horizon. So we've got some vocabulary that relates to the heavens, right? We've got the name of the bodies, the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, the clouds, everything we see in the heavens. And then we've got the names of the different times that relate to light and darkness. We've got the day, the morning, dawn, daybreak, evening, and twilight. So a bunch of vocabulary that relates to the heavens and the different effects of the heavens on our daily life. Okay. All right. So that's all for that lesson. Any questions about that vocab lesson before we go on? Pretty simple. Just make sure you memorize the words in italics and practice good vocabulary. Practice good vocabulary, think of English derivatives, and memorize the words in italics, okay? So that's all for lesson 4 in vocab. Okay, so let's get on to Latin reading. I'd like to talk about grammar too, but I want to talk about grammar after we look at the Latin reading. I don't want to talk about grammar first. And remember, you should never study grammar by itself. Grammar is intended to help us understand language, so you should always be studying reading and composition, or literature and composition first as your main study, and then study grammar to understand the reading and writing and to improve your writing and speaking. Okay? Sorry about that. All right, so this is lesson 2 in Latin reading. Lesson 2. How many of you are finished with lesson 1? I know some of you are just getting started. How many are finished with lesson 1? So most of you. So you're either working on this lesson or past this lesson. Good. All right, good. So let's work on this lesson together. Verse 6. Don't type anything until I ask for it. I want to make sure you hear the reading, get pronunciation figured out, and then we'll talk about the vocab and the grammar. Verse 6, first phrase here. Fuit, notice it's 2 syllables. It's not a diphthong. It's not fuit. It's fuit, 2 syllables. Fuit homo missus a Deo. Fuit homo missus a Deo. What does fuit mean? Let's be quick about this. What does fuit mean? It means there was. Yeah, that's pretty sloppy answers. I saw a bunch of different things. It means there was. There was. All right? There was. Not just there. Some of you wrote there. There is part of the translation, but it means there was. The verb. There was. There was homo. What does homo mean? Means man. Very good. Now, in a word like homosexual, is that where does that word come from this word homo? Yes or no? No, why not? Why not? Who knows where that word homo in the word homosexual, where does that word come from? I don't know. It comes from Greek. Okay. So just because it's the same, it looks the same, it's actually not the same word. This word homo means man. That word, like homogeneous, right? Like homogeneous milk, or homogeneous is how it's actually pronounced. It means the same. That word homo comes from Greek, which means the same. Okay. This homo here in Latin is a different word. It means man. It means human. It doesn't mean man like masculine man. There's another word for that. Who knows the word for man as a masculine man? Who knows what the word for man is? Not homo. Very good, George. Vir. That's right. So we want to just say a man like Tom is a man, and we want to talk about a masculine person. The word is vir or vir in classical Latin. Homo here just means human. Okay. So fuit homo, there was a man, there was a human. Missus. What does missus mean? Sent. Very good. Sent. That's always easy to remember because we can think of a missile being shot somewhere. And then we have a prepositional phrase, a deo. What does a deo mean? Not to God, it means from God. What about ecclesiastical Latin? What about it? I don't know what you're asking there. Ecclesiastical Latin is just later Christian Latin pronunciation, same language. So fuit homo missus a deo. Now, one of you guessed that a deo. Stop a second and listen to this question. It's a challenging one. One of you guessed to God. All right, a deo. Who can explain why that's wrong? Who can explain what that student is thinking of when she said to God? Who can explain what's wrong with that? Okay, very good. Very good. Now you'd only know this if you're further on in the lesson. So if you don't know, don't feel like there's something wrong with you. You don't necessarily have a learning disability just because you don't know an answer. There are other kids who are further along and they've learned different words. There are two different words in Latin that can make two different phrases. We could have ad deum, which means to God, and we have a deo, which means from God. And I'm just typing this so you can see it. So ad deum would mean to God, but ad deo means from God. And this word where does this word come from? What is this word What is No. It's an abbreviation of a word. It's just part of a word. What is the word? Ab. Very good, George. It means from, but the word is ab. Here we have just Why do we have just here? Why is it just Why doesn't it say ab? Why doesn't it say ab? Good, George. That's right. That's right, Lara. Okay. Just practice to yourself. Say ab deo 5 times fast. Ab deo. You feel how dumb that sounds, right? How clumsy it is to say abadeo, abadeo, abadeo. It's very clumsy, awkward to pronounce. So they just drop that B and make it easier to pronounce. What do we call that in language? What do we call when we make changes for the sake of sound? Not poetic license. What do we call it? Not euphoria. That's a good euphony. Very good. Euphony. Okay. We've got to work on spelling It looks like we're going to need to have a spelling live class. It's called euphony. Sounding good, easy to pronounce. That's euphony. We learned about that in grammar. So the B drops out and we just have adeo, okay? Notice that the D would never drop out. So if we had ad deum, the D would never drop out because that's obviously easy to pronounce. All right. Well, if you're typing too fast, you can fix that, right? By just typing not too fast. So you can fix that. All right. So first phrase here. Fuit homo missus ad Deo. There was a man sent from God. There was a man sent from God. Next phrase. Cui nomen erat Ioannes. Cui nomen erat Ioannes. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think in this word, the U and the I actually are a diphthong. I think it's one syllable, qui. Qui nomen erat Ioannes. So what does that word qui mean? For whom? Very good. Nomen, what does nomen mean? Nomen means name. Very good. And if you type a little late, it's okay. I know you're answering the previous question. For whom, the name erat. What does erat mean? Was. Okay, good. And then Ioannes. Ioannes, what does Ioannes mean? John. Very good. All right, now let me ask a question here, a little grammar challenge question for some of you more advanced students. We said the word fuit means was, and we said the word erat means was. Why are there two different words? What's the difference? Does anybody know the difference? Notice I didn't say, can anybody wildly guess at what the difference might be? I said, does anybody know the difference? No, they're not different cases. Verbs actually don't have cases. Anybody know the difference between fuit and erat? They're actually two different forms of the same verb. Two different forms of the same verb. Nobody knows? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nobody knows? Okay. So we've got some grammar work to do. Fuit is the perfect tense. I'll type it here so you can see this. And erat is the imperfect tense. So two different forms of the verb. Fuat is the perfect tense. Erat is the imperfect tense. Now let me ask you this. What is the perfect tense? What do you think the perfect tense means? They're both past tense verbs. They're both past tense. Fuit and erat, they're both past tense. That's why they're both translated was. What do you think a perfect tense verb is? Perfect tense. Who can explain what a perfect tense verb is? Rather than chat each other about not knowing things, just answer the question. What is a perfect tense verb? Yeah, George, you're kind of scratching the surface there. Perfect tense means it's a past action that's complete, okay? Perfect just means complete. So perfect tense verb is a past tense verb where the action is complete. Erat is imperfect. It's a past tense verb where the action isn't really a complete action. So just think about it. There was, at some point in time, a man sent from God. Okay? He was sent from God once, and then it was over, right? It was a completed action. He was sent. For whom the name was John. His name wasn't John for a moment. His name, there was no time where he was finished being named John. His name was continually John. So erat is the right form of the verb to say his name was John, but to say that he was sent, that there was a man sent, makes a good use of a perfect tense verb, okay? So they're both past tense. They're both past tense. Yeah, it's still John, that's right. Okay, they're both past tense. The perfect tense expresses the idea that the action is finished. The imperfect tense says it's more of an ongoing condition or state, all right? So that's the difference. You don't have to know that in Latin reading, but I just want to help you understand why there are two different verb forms. So qui nomen erat Ioannes means for whom the name was John. Now in English, we could translate that whose name was John. We express it in a different way. We say whose name was John. We wouldn't say for whom the name was John, but that's the Latin expression. That's the Latin way of saying that. For whom the name was John. Okay, so verse 6. Fuit homo missus ad Deo, qui nomen erat Ioannes. There was a man sent from God for whom the name was John. Verse 7. Hic venit in testimonium. Hic venit in testimonium. Hic venit in testimonium. What does the word hic mean? What does the word hic mean? This, very good. What does that word this refer to? What is that referring to? What? John, very good. Okay. Yeah, Connor, it could be man. That's fine. All right. John or man, either one. So this man, and this is a masculine form of hic because it refers to a masculine thing, John. This man venit. What does venit mean? Came. Very good. This man came. Notice also that that is a perfect tense verb. So notice he came at once and it was a finished event, right? Okay. He came into the world. He came in testimonium. In testimonium. What does in testimonium mean? Not into testimony. Does that make any sense? He didn't come in testimony. He came for a testimony. He came as a testimony, as a witness. Okay? In testimonium means he came for a testimony, for the purpose of giving a testimony. That's a prepositional phrase. Now, what I want you to pay attention to as we get into this, and again, I know this is a lot of information that I give you, but you can A, watch this video again if you ever need to, or B, learn this when you study the lesson by yourself. Notice that when we have these prepositional phrases, there's two things to pay attention for that you have to learn to watch for. First, you have to look at the preposition itself and know what the possible meanings are for a preposition. The second thing you have to look for is the ending of the noun that follows the preposition, because that's what determines the right translation. So in testimonium, we have the preposition in followed by a noun in the accusative case. And when in is followed by the accusative case, it's translated as either to or for. Okay? If in is followed by the ablative case, like down here, you see down here we have in followed by an ablative case. That's when in is translated in, like in principio. That's an ablative case. Okay, so one of the things that's causing the change of the translation is the case of the noun that comes after the preposition. All right, you got that? I don't think that's too complicated to understand. So when you've got a prepositional phrase, you've got the preposition like in, and then also the ending of the noun. Those two things determine the translation. Okay. So this man came for a testimony. This man came for a testimony. Then we've got the next phrase, ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. Ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. The word ut, what does the word ut mean? So that, I see you all had that ready to fire away there. That was good. Okay. I'll make sure I ask questions you don't expect to frustrate your attempts to get ahead of me. So we have ut. Who can tell me what part of speech ut is? It means so that. That's right. What part of speech is it? What part of speech? I'll let you all answer first, so the ones that get it wrong will be embarrassed. Go ahead, answer it. What part of speech is ut? Now, how do we know the part of speech? How do we know the part of speech? There's two ways that we identify the part of speech. All right, so you don't have to guess. It's not a mystery. Other students who get it right don't have some secret knowledge revealed to them while they sleep. There's two ways to identify the part of speech. First of all, the definition of the word. So if you just look at that word and I ask you, what does it mean? We've got to work on spelling because process of illumination is not the right phrase. You're thinking of process of elimination. Process of elimination, not process of illumination. That would be like paragraphs that enlighten people. This is process of elimination. Okay? All right. So we have ut, and I asked you, what does it mean? And most of you answered correctly, means so that. So you think of the meaning and you ask, well, what part of speech would so that be? Okay. And then secondly, you think about the function of that word in the phrase or in the sentence. What is it doing? Is it naming something? Well, then it's a noun. Is it expressing an action? Well, then it's a verb. Is it standing in place of some other name? Then it's a pronoun. So think about what the word is doing in the sentence or in the phrase. We have this word ut. It's translated as so that. It's translated as so that, ut, and it connects phrases together, right? This man came for a testimony so that a testimony he might give. It joins those phrases together. So it's a conjunction. So those of you who guessed correctly, congratulations. Conjunction, very good. Okay, so to figure out the part of speech, think of two things. First of all, the meaning of the word itself, and secondly, what it's doing in the sentence. That's how you identify the part of speech, okay? We'll talk about that a little more when we look at grammar. All right, so ut testimonium, why did he come? This man came for a testimony. Why? So that testimonium, a testimony, perhiberet. What does perhiberet mean? Perhiberet. He might give. Very good. Now notice you're adding might in there, right? That he might give. He might give. Notice it doesn't say he gives a testimony. It says that he might give a testimony. That's an example of a different verb mood. Okay? A different verb mood, a different manner of speaking. It's a different kind of verb. It doesn't say that he gave testimony. It says that he came so that he might give. It expresses the purpose. Does anybody know what that mood is called? Anybody know what that's called? I'll help you. The simple, plain mood that we use to say things plainly is called the indicative mood. Very good, Sarah. That's right. This mood here is called the subjunctive mood. Okay, the subjunctive mood, as Sarah said. So you see an example of a different mood, a different verb form. Okay. Now, when you study logic, or I should say, if you study logic, hopefully you will, you'll learn that in logic, we only discuss verbs in the indicative mood. So here we have a verb in the subjunctive mood. Notice it's the second verb in the sentence. We have in verse 7, this man came for a testimony so that a testimony he might give about the light. Notice how it doesn't say that he gave testimony. It says this is the purpose for which he came. He came so that he might give. So it's not really saying he did give. It's saying he came, and the purpose of his coming was so that he might give. It's a different mode or mood of expression. Okay, not saying that he accomplished his goal. We're just saying he came so that he might give a testimony. We don't know yet if he succeeds in that mission. He came so that he might give testimony de lumine. De lumine, this is a prepositional phrase. What does de lumine mean? Concerning the light, about the light. Very good. Concerning the light, that's right. Concerning the light. Now, if you look up the word de in a Latin dictionary, you might get a bunch of different meanings. Okay, you might get down from, from, and many others. How do you determine the meaning? If you look in a dictionary and you've got a whole list of possible meanings, how do you determine the right one to use? Who knows how to figure that out? Anybody? Silence on the chat. Yeah, very good, George. The context. Okay. So you use your knowledge of vocabulary to help you translate, and then you use your understanding of the passage as you translate it, and it starts to get clearer. You then use that knowledge of the passage to go back and perfect the translation. So the translation works like a cycle. You use vocabulary to get the translation started, use your knowledge of grammar to get the translation started. And then as the translation begins to become clear, you then use the translation for context to then go back and clarify the translation. Okay, so it's like a cycle. So de lumine, about or concerning the light. So that a testimony he might give about the light. Here we have ut again. What does ut mean again? What does ut mean again? So that, very good. Very good. So that omnes, what does omnes mean? All, you say all what? All things, all men, all what? Some of you guess all things. Some of you play it safe and just say all. Some say all men. So that all, we have to ask the question, all what? Now let's use this as an example of how we use context to translate. Let's say we don't know, right? Say we don't know whether it should be all things or all men. Well, let's keep going with the translation, and we'll let the translation direct the translation. So that all something, whatever, we don't know yet, so that all crederent. What does crederent mean? What does crederent mean? Notice you're typing might believe. Notice you're using that word might again in the translation, right? Might believe, because this is another example of a subjunctive mood verb. Okay. So that all blank might believe. Now, what believes? Do things believe? What believes? Men believe. Okay. Men believe. Yeah. So you can see how the context, when we talk about whatever this subject is, the action of the subject is believing. Well, only men believe. So that all men might believe. And we have another prepositional phrase. Per illum, a preposition and a pronoun. What does per illum mean? Through him or by him. Both of those are correct. Through him or by him. So that all men might believe per illum, through him, so that he might be the means, or he might be the instrument by which all men come to believe, right? So verse 7, hic venit in testimonium, this man came for a testimony, ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine, so that a testimony he might give about the light, ut omnes crederent per illum, so that all men might believe through him. So we have one main clause here. This man came for a testimony, right? This man came for a testimony. That's our main clause. And then we've got these two clauses that state the purpose, so that he might give a testimony and so that all might believe through him. So we have one main clause and two what are called purpose clauses, okay? That explain the purpose of the action. And notice that those two purpose clauses, you'll learn about this in syntax later on. Notice that the two purpose clauses, which are called subordinate clauses, don't use the indicative mood of the verb, but they use the subjunctive mood of the verb. So all of that information is wrapped up in the grammar of the sentence, okay? So that's verse 7, good. We have a few more minutes. Let's look at verse 8. Non erat ille lux. Non erat ille lux. What does non mean? What does non mean? Not. Very good. What part of speech is non? Don't guess. Think. Use the process of elimination. What part of speech? Nope, not conjunction. You have to think and use the process of elimination. And I'm not picking on you, Connor, because at least you took a guess. Notice that everyone gets silent when they don't know the answer. The chat stops. So Connor guessed conjunction. Cecilia guessed preposition. George said adverb. We've got verb, adverb, preposition. So we've got quite a mix here, right? We've got quite a mix of opinions here. What does the word known do? I told you there's two ways to think about a part of speech. First, by the meaning. We know that it means not, okay? But second, think about what it does. Who can explain to me what the word not does? What does the word not or known do in this phrase, in this sentence? It doesn't command. I've never looked at anyone and said not and given a command, right? It's not a command. What does not do? It modifies the verb, right? It negates. Did someone say it negates something? Yes, Serena said it negates. It doesn't negate something. It negates a verb in this sentence, okay? We have erat, which means he was, and we have non, which means not he was. That's what it means to negate something. Not was he. We can move the words around and say not was he. He was not. So not modifies the verb. It denies the verb. That's an adverb, okay? So the word non or not is an adverb. It modifies the verb, non erat. Not was he. Ille is the pronoun. What does ille mean? What does ille mean? It means he, very good. Okay, not was he the light, lux. Not was he the light. Now let me ask you this. What does the word erat mean? What does the word erat mean? You see, that answer is a little bit lazy. It means a little bit more than that. What does it mean? Not just was. He was, right? He was, good, okay? He, it, or she. And we make the decision, he, it, or she, based on the context, right? It says not was he, and then we have ille after that. Why would we have the pronoun after the pronoun is already sort of contained in the verb? It already means he was. Why would we say not was he the light? Why do you think we would do that? Why do you think we do that? Not was he. It doesn't mean himself. No, there's another word for himself. There's no object of erat. Erat is a copula, right? There's no object. Lara, that's getting to the answer. To make it certain, right? What's the word you're getting at there? Okay. We already know it's a third person. Why is ille added after the verb, which already expresses the person? I'll type it here. It's for emphasis. Okay. Make it more obvious. Very good, Sarah. That's right. Okay, so we have almost like a restatement of the person, which makes it more obvious, which emphasizes it. Okay, so non erat ille, not was he, lux, the light, not was he the light. Sed ut testimonium perhiberet de lumine. Let's do this one quickly. What does the word sed mean? But, very good. What part of speech is said? Think, don't guess. Please get it right. Please get it right. Please get it right. Looks good. Looks good. Conjunction. That's right. Okay. Conjunction. All right. He was not the light, but so that ut testimony he might give de lumine. We've already translated all this. But so that a testimony he might give concerning the light. All right. He was not the light, but he came so that a testimony he might give concerning the light. All right, and you notice there's some strange things to investigate, like lux and lumine. They're both translated light, but they're two different words in Latin. They're not two different forms, they're two different words. So when you see something like that, you might want to check that out and see if there's some kind of intentional difference, right? Whether when Saint Jerome translated that, there was a reason why he used lux for one and lumine for another. Let me ask you, if you wanted to investigate that, let's say you look at that and you say, in English, both of those words mean light. Why would St. Jerome, who translated the Bible into Latin, why would he use two different Latin words? How might you find an answer to that question? Who's got an idea? How might you find an answer to that question? Why did St. Jerome use two different Latin words? You can't ask him. Well, I mean, you can ask him technically, but you might not get an answer. How do you think you might figure out why St. Jerome would use two different words? Google it. Commentaries on the Bible. I didn't say Google it was a good answer. Don't start liking it. Latin grammar. That's a safe answer, but not a right answer. You could study Latin. We're already sort of committed to that, I think. There you go. Victor's got it. All right, Victor's got it. Look at the Greek, right? Remember that St. Jerome was translating the Greek into Latin here. So if we want to figure out, maybe there's a reason why St. Jerome used two different words. We might find the answer to that if we look at the original Greek text. We might see that there's two different words. We might not. Or we might see that St. Jerome is actually making a decision based on interpretation. Maybe he's trying to show us some meaning of the text and is making an interpretation. Okay, so when we see things like that, those are points where there's usually some interesting investigation to get into. Try to figure out why two different words would be used. Okay, so we've gotten through verse 8. So verses 6, 7, and 8. And we could just keep digging and digging and digging and talk about more and more information as we go through the translation. But I hope that that covers most of the stuff that's in your lessons and also adds a little extra. Adds a little extra to think about. Okay, the Greek text of the Gospel of St. John, right? Which, if you're in Greek reading, you'll study. Okay, so you can check it out over there. So we're through verse 8. One last thing I want to do, just look at grammar. Notice in the Latin grammar, we're talking about parts of speech. Article 16 covers the parts of speech, okay? Article 16 covers the parts of speech, gives you a list of parts of speech, descriptions, and examples of the parts of speech. So if you struggle to identify the parts of speech, rather than blame the universe, study the lesson in grammar on the parts of speech. Okay, Article 16. Article 16. All right, it's not a genetic problem you have that prevents you from identifying the parts of speech. It's not the wrong breakfast. You just have to study the parts of speech. Learn the names of the parts of speech. Learn the descriptions here. And I call them descriptions because they're not really definitions. They're just descriptions. Look at the examples. That'll help you to identify them. And over time, you'll get better and better. Yeah, really. Blame the world, So don't blame external factors. You just have to study. This is a science or an art, and these things can be learned by study and practice, okay? So Article 16, if you struggle with identifying parts of speech, and some of you, we have evidence that some of you do, from your answers in the text chat there, you might want to take some time and study Article 16 in Latin grammar, okay? There are many versions of the Greek New Testament. Which one should we use? Well, there may be many versions, but you don't have many versions. You probably have one or two. So I would say study that one, right? You're not going to stumble into 75 different versions of the Greek text. You probably have one available to you. The right one. That's a good answer, Bernadette. All right. But I mean, really, seriously, not to joke around there. I mean, really, you have one or two that you would actually have access to, or that are sort of the commonly used Greek texts. Just use one of the common versions. Okay, so that's all for today. We got through our vocab. We got through a few verses of lesson 2 in Latin reading, and I just wanted to point out to you where the lesson on the parts of speech is, so you can study it, hopefully. Now that I've shown you where it is, next week I can quiz you on the parts of speech mercilessly, because you have no excuse for not knowing them and identifying them correctly. So we'll get a little more competitive, hopefully, with identifying them correctly. But that's all for today. So if you'd like to get going, it's 2 o'clock. I'll cut off there. I'm going to turn off the recording. And then if there's any questions you have or anything you'd like to talk about, I'll hang out with you as long as new questions come in. All right. Thank you for coming. I'm going to stop the recording first. 1 second here.